On this episode of In Conversation With, I had the opportunity to sit down with one of the most visionary and inspired leaders that I have met. Anthonia Ogundele is the executive director of Ethos Lab out of British Columbia. They are a program that is engaging youth in experiences in STEAM and in culture that is partnered with Actua's member at the University of British Columbia, Gearing Up. Anthonia and I had a discussion about science culture and science and society, and the various ways in which we need to change the perception around STEM and STEAM so that it reflects the current realities of the communities that we serve. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have the chance to talk more to you, and we've had the chance to interact in the past, and we're lucky enough to get to work with you and your organization through our Actua network members, so it's nice to get to sit down with you. Tell me about Ethos Lab.
Ethos Lab is a Black-led organization based in Vancouver, British Columbia, that delivers culturally integrated STEAM programming. And we deliver after-school programs that kids can register for. We go into the schools and deliver programming in the schools. And then we also deliver camps. And so it's been really exciting. Our camps range from building cities in virtual reality to sustainability camps where they go out, forage, and then create objects out of the things that they get.
That is so great. And you partner with our network member at UBC.
So we partner with UBC Gearing Up on our program called Early Explorers. These are young people between grade 5 and 7. And it's been a massive success. It's been really great.
I've heard your story. It's so incredibly inspiring, but tell us how you came to be the founder of Ethos Lab.
Again, thank you so much for this conversation. I come to this conversation as a parent. I come to this conversation as a resilience professional. And I think to talk about the genesis of anything that you create, to say it's like this kind of like one thing is really complicated for me. But I will say, I have a 17-year-old daughter. And when she was 11 years old, I saw her affinity towards, hands-on engineering type building, Legos, things like that. And she started participating in STEAM programming. And she was the only girl, and she was the only Black girl in the space. And I saw what it looked like in terms of the social interactions there for her between the leadership and the other young people. She went on about what she does, and she said she had a great time, but that it could be better. And in terms of creating a space where her whole self can be acknowledged. And then thinking about my own experiences as a resiliency professional, having managed, major disasters, always consistently looking at business continuity, disaster recovery time objectives, and talking to IT and IT architecture, things like that. I knew and very much take a risk-based approach to this work in seeing if we don't change the conditions that my daughter's operating in, we're going to have a huge problem. And we're already seeing it in terms of underrepresentation in STEAM. But with the acceleration of new and emerging technologies, it's going to be a disaster. So that's how and why I started Ethos Lab.
I knew you worked in emergency response. I know about Ethos Lab. I didn't realize the connection between the two things. But if someone asks me about you, I would say you are like one of the most innovative, optimistic leaders that I've met. But you have this like crisis response risk lens that you look at everything through. How do you balance those two things?
It's really hard when you think about like how one manages disasters and being like optimistic in managing a disaster. I think it's just this muscle that was in me. And one person might call it an emergency manager, which I was, and a resiliency professional. The other is also entrepreneurial, right? Like that's what entrepreneurs do. They see and notice challenges or issues and problems in society, and they create the systems to be able to like solve these problems. And so how do we put in the infrastructure and legacy, but more importantly, build a cultural foundation so that we can create the society that we want to create, which is why it's called Ethos Lab.
With that, tell us a little bit more about how you incorporate culture so strongly. How do you make that the core of what happens at Ethos Lab to help youth to see themselves in STEAM? Because what struck me the first time that we met was you sharing the story of young people that you were working with who just said, I do not relate to STEAM. I don't relate to STEM. I don't like those words, but I love robotics and I love helping people. I love building solutions. Talk about that. How do you incorporate culture, and how have you overcome some of those responses to negative responses to STEAM?
Yeah, and like visceral responses,
Yeah.
right? That I think we can't ignore that STEAM or STEM has there's like an identity that's tied to it.
Yes.
Like what the STEM kid looks like, or as we grow up in high schools, I'm the artsy kid.
Yes.
I'm the jock. Like we have done a disservice in our society by categorizing young people in these ways, and in many different ways we do it to ourselves and saying like, oh, I do this thing so I can't do those other things.
Right.
But there is a complexity to an identity. And so when it comes to how and what we do in terms of integrating culture, there's kind of two ways to it. Number one is we're trying to bring in greater representation in STEAM. And so we are a Black-led, Black-centered organization, and we center the humanity of the Black experience. That means we create environments where Black youth are respected, reflected, protected, and connected. And on that design premise, you're creating a more inclusive environment for all young people to enter into. The other piece is like really looking at culture more just commonly. Culture is the way we interact with each other. Culture is like our shared values. And so we've put in our culture, we're really grounded on seeing culture as a value.
Yes.
Everyone's diverse in different backgrounds as having value. And also like community and like empathy.
Yes.
Like just creating an environment where I see you and you see me. And then that's where, again, grounding on the humanity of the Black experience comes in. It's one thing to teach even myself about Black history, but there's another thing for you to look at me and say, like, what you say matters and you're valued.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what a lot of Black youth are looking for. I know as being, an executive or a leader in a space and being the only one in the room, I just want to know that my voice matters and that I'm valued. And I'd love to see more people that look like me around the table, but I know the current culture that we have has excluded certain groups, and I think it was undeniable for me to look at young people as the experts of the now, to be able to like really change the future that we have for us.
I really appreciate that approach to figuring out, and as an organization, Actua, we're a STEM organization, but it's so much more than that.
It is.
And I think it's so important that we listen, and we are deeply listening to community partners and leaders like you and like our Indigenous partners, like the youth, the strong youth voice that we have cultivated, various diverse communities who are all saying to us, STEM does not speak to us in the way that, it could, the way that we hope it to, the way that we, the passion that we feel about specific topics is not attached to STEM. And I think as an organization, Actua needs to really, reflect on that and think about that, because the words do matter. The way we communicate matters. The whole purpose of the core of our organization is that people feel included, and that, they come into an Actua space or a network member space, and it feels like a safe space for them to explore and be themselves and, bring their full selves there. How do you, because you have incredibly engaged youth participants. They don't want to talk about the word STEAM or STEM, but they're super intrigued by the actual topic areas. What is speaking to them? How have you progressed in that? Whole journey.
I think I do want to put out there again, we're a really new organization. Like we're only a handful of years old, with half of that being during a pandemic.
Yes.
Which is a whole other ball game. But again, we've recently we do programming again after school camps and such. But we've recently started this event called the Blackathon, or Black History Hackathon, and that's really proven to be a catalyst for a lot of young people finding their space. So that's really resonating with them. This idea of coming together, hacking problems, building. That has been a place where I see young people really lighting up.
Yeah.
And from doing the Blackathon, we've just been invited into schools to really, catalyze that energy. And what makes it different, again, is we honor a Black inventor, and we bring it forward and hack contemporary invention. And it's Black leadership that's like leading these and facilitating it. It's centering equity. And so it's just been really amazing to see how it's been impacting young people to then want to be a part and engage in the community that we're a part of.
I also really appreciate the context, or the approach of helping youth to see that they have the expertise. What are the other skills that you're seeing or that you're working on particularly in your program?
Yeah. Storytelling. World building. Really
World building?
World building.
Okay.
Really starting to think about how to create a different reality.
Wow.
My background is I did an undergrad in political science, University of Ottawa, and concentration in governance and public policy, and then I did my master's in urban planning. And my master's in urban planning or environmental studies was that I saw that the world is the built environment around us is intentional. Like someone decides how high this is going to be or whatever. And I was like, whoa, you can change the world. And wait a second, there's a room of people that do that. And so world building, this idea that you can like impact and influence the world around you, and we leverage story to be able to do that, helps a young person then leverage that tool to say, I can influence the world around me. I have a voice. There are certain tools that can help me create and build and change something that are around me. And I think oftentimes, in particular for Black and racialized youth and gender diverse youth, is that they don't, like, their voices aren't necessarily heard.
Right.
We entered into a space where those voices were entering and starting to matter. And now we're in this really interesting space. And so the other piece that I would say that is incredibly critical is empathy in interpersonal connection. And that's why we start from community, is that you can build all of these different things, but if you don't, if these kids don't want to play with each other, then like how are we gonna solve it with a policy at the board table? Our programming is open to all young people. And so I have conversations with parents that say, I hear that there are a lot of Black kids. Is my child going to be okay? And you start to see also how the social interactions happen as well in spaces between like, whoa, it's a Black majority. Like these kids, non-Black kids in a space in Vancouver where there's only 1% of the population is Black can go through their whole school careers never interacting with another child who's Black. And so you come into this space and you're like, you have to come up against this reality of I'm connecting with a population that I've only ever seen on like TV, or if I've been on YouTube, I maybe have certain biases that I've maybe gathered from that. And so we're talking about 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds. Let them play together. That's where it needs to start.
That was such a great answer. Can you share a little bit about what's your vision for Ethos Lab moving forward? What are your plans? What are you excited about?
Oh,
yes.
I'm very excited about the story. So our Ethos Lab has undergone an 18-month process of creating a lore or a canon to define our culture. And it was created by 11 young people called the Griots, which is storytellers. and now starting to really leverage that as a space to have generative conversations around social issues, generative conversations around like how to solve different problems. So imagine creating a world like Star Wars, and then now we can do innovation in that. So
because you can, in that world, you're not limited by some of the limitations of this
of
world?
this, yeah,
Is that what the purpose is?
yeah. So the young people imagined this space or world, just like you would imagine Harry Potter and fan fiction, you know, and now we can like say, oh, there's an attack. How do we solve it? These are the tools. And then the tools might be, okay, you have to learn how to use Unity game engine and create a new reality to solve that problem. Or we're going to use these robots to be able to capture these things from underwater. What are the things they have to consider? And creating these spaces where the kid that may not necessarily feel themselves to be a part of STEM, feel themselves to be a part of a story, something bigger than themselves. So it's super exciting, and it's not that you stay in the story, it's that you have to be able to bring it back and bring it into reality as well too.
It's amazing that your organization's only been around. It just feels like there's just such a depth of the work, and you've come, you've done a lot in a short amount of time. My final question is about you personally and leadership, because we've been talking a lot about leadership. How do you view yourself as a leader?
Well, if you asked me this a while ago, I'm like just audacious and bold, and like a visionary like leader.
Yeah.
I know, again, maybe that's the muscle of emergency management and risk management. You kind of have to know what's coming down the pipe in order to respond.
Yes.
And I think I've had the diversity of experiences in order to like respond in a particular kind of way. But I'd say like, I have the ability to be able to like see and see patterns. And so that's how I would kind of describe first where my leadership comes from, and very much like a mentor leader is how I would have defined myself in the past. Where I'm at right now, I'm in a really interesting place in my leadership journey, because leadership takes a lot of courage, a lot of courage to be yourself, and a lot of courage to be messy in plain sight. So I would say I'm in a leadership transition right now, one that is really standing in my faith and in my authentic self, and giving myself permission to do that, to be able to lead and model by example for other people to be able to stand in that. When you step into who you are and you're courageous, relationships change, things change. And that's a part of leadership, is accepting and understanding that change will happen, and it's how you respond to it, and hold a relationship in that.
Thank you so much for this conversation. It was so great to have the chance to sit down and talk to you about Ethos Lab, about leadership. I really look forward to more conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.